treated unfairly by the news media and by Gary by raising this issue today.
No, we just consistently parse every single syllable, and I've never seen anyone.
See, all you do is try to brush away what happened today.
And Gary, do you say
that away? If one argument doesn't work, you come up with another one.
And Gary, didn't you say the president was asked a second time about his words and basically said the same thing?
Almost.
So there you go. Let's not have accountability for what we say. That's okay. And let's do whataboutism, Steve. That's your brand.
What I say? What did I say? I've said consistently, and I continue to say, this is his biggest impediment in governance.
But people who criticize him for it, they never criticize the previous president, and they would never criticize the future president. The only president whose words are being parsed are Trump's.
Well, you know what? When Mayorkas was letting the country go to hell with immigration, I never heard any shit about Mayorkas consistently saying the border was under control. Everybody, I mean to a person, did not parse anything about bullshit.
I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Oh, nobody parsed on that one, because that's a Democrat. Nobody said a damn thing about that.
No one said a thing about Mayorkas, why he's letting the southern border just be overrun and stood.
A lot of people said about it. A lot of people said about it. A lot of them came to the stage to say about it. So you can't say no one, and when you say no one, I only have to find one example of someone saying it, and that makes your comment inaccurate.
Well, let's find the word for it.
There wasn't a big drumbeat. There wasn't a big drumbeat of concern. The mainstream media did not go and show videotapes of caravans of people coming from South America through Central America into Mexico to our border.
How many people called out his consonant articulation that's under control? How many?
A lot of people did. Do you want me to research it right now and tell you? Not the Democrats, but there were a lot of people who did.
Yeah.
Your memory is failing you, buddy.
No, it ain't.
You're younger than me. Your memory shouldn't be failing you.
No, my memory ain't failing me. You know, Trump has always been bombastic, and he's been a poor articulator of his positions.
And that explains everything.
No, that's a given. But the underlying facts of what's going on here have not changed, and I'll leave it there.
Well, there was strong opposition to Biden's immigration policies. That's why they came up with that bill that Marshall hates so much. There was actually bipartisan opposition to the president's immigration policies. And I will forward to you a University of Cincinnati study that actually looked into all of that. Critics from the Republican side about the open borders, and critics from the liberal side for maybe different reasons. But there was a lot of criticism. Your memory is failing you. I will send it. I will post it to the chat so everybody can see it. Meryl, followed by Daryl.
I'm going to have to personalize something for a minute. I just want to warn Steve that when he literally said, this was his literally said, about what's happening and people complaining or how other people are grasping this, and he said, and I quote, "Well, what this tells me is that a bunch of people, ... a bunch of people." That is pretty dismissive. That language is extremely dismissive of people that are suffering or people that are affected, and that's where language is important. You talk about Trump. Well, best thing or worst thing about him is he's bombastic. But he's bombastic, but then you always come up with a reason you always know his motive. Whatever his motive is, it's one that you defend. and you've got to be careful. But what it jumped out at me when you said, what this says to me is a bunch of people. I don't know who the bunch of people, how you view, that tells me you view them very inappropriately. It tells me that there's not a lot of empathy there. And I don't mean to say that. I don't mean to hurt your feelings. I'm just saying you ought to take it into consideration. And I think everybody ought to take into consideration. This economy, the problems that people were having is not new. It's not just because of the war. It added to it. We had a president who was obsessed with tariffs. He was obsessed with them. And we have farmers that are greater number of farmers than ever before that are filing bankruptcy. We have the problem with fertilizer. There were all kinds of problems. What Canada was able to try to work around, what China was able to try to work around. People don't seem to understand that this economy people were being affected in this economy before the war. This was just made it worse. So I do think that should be taken into consideration. And I think you should take into consideration what he says now, even. He still says, I'm going to do tariffs this, and I want to take this in Greenland. I don't think the war is not major to him. The war is a pain in the butt to him. And that's how he views it. This is interfering with his ability to do the other things that he wants to do. And let's not forget, while some people are having a problem, they can't have to carpool or they're making this in church and something. This man is asking us to pay for painting the river, painting this and buying this. And oh no, guess what? That White House, the East Wing really isn't all donors. We are the donors. So I think that should be taken into consideration, that people that are hurting right now are looking at that and they are paying attention to that. And so that's one thing I think that is extremely important. I would also like to point out that I began researching Donald Trump years ago on a bet with my boss. And it was when Donald Trump was starting to talk about the birthers. And he was not running for president. He didn't run for president till later. And I started to research, and I was able to get one tax return I was able to get. And if you think that man was generous, I'll tell you who he was generous to. His daughter's dance school. That's it. That's who he was generous to. And regarding the billionaires, the millionaire, whatever you think he was, this great businessman, he was not viewed as a great businessman in New York. He was not. His money came from his father, the trust funds from tax evasion. He was not respected as a great real estate person. And if you ever wanted to read what the reporters on the street used to write about him, was just that it was the old Ann Richards thing about George Bush, born on third base, thought he hit a triple. This, in that he had no gumption, no compassion, no understanding. And real estate agents, the real estate people, the billionaires then, they weren't flocking to him. They were staying away from him. And that's why he was so angry with the New York Times. And now you've got a bunch of billionaires who saw that he has been reelected, and this is where he's making his money, and this is where they're making even more money than that they need, but it's more money. So I do believe that some people ought to take into consideration what he was before, what he was in his first presidency. And by the way, the reason you didn't have immigration laws for 30 years, you couldn't put together immigration laws between the Democrats and the Republicans, is because the Republicans, they were affected by all the companies that said, we're going to lose our employees. They were getting cheap labor, and they were losing their employees. So that's just one more thing I'd like to throw into it. And I'm sorry if I don't mean to be mean about this, but he's mean. He is a mean person. And while he is telling you, buck up, everybody, he's making billions. His family is making billions. The Saudis, he's not going to the Saudis. He's not sending somebody to the Saudis to negotiate a good deal. They're getting good deals for themselves as well. And nobody makes as much money during this presidency as his corporation and his family is. And it's right out in the open. We're not calling it corrupt. We can't call it corrupt because it's right out in the open. Nobody's doing anything about it. Congress isn't doing anything about it. Congress isn't going to do anything about this war. But the thing about Trump right now is he got us into this for one reason. Don't think it was just because, maybe we're going to have a nuclear weapon that was going to affect us right away. He had advice. He had advisors who said, don't do this. Don't do this now. But what you have is a narcissist who thought, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the hero and I'm going to be the best guy in the world, and didn't have a strategy. And we're stuck right now. And it's a shame and it's awful. But he is not. What you're really experiencing now is pardon me, I'm going to break the Goldwater rule, is a narcissistic fallout. He is falling out. He's failing right now. And that's why he says what he says. And he's going to go to China and he's going to come back and he said, they love me. Oh, yeah, he loved me. We're doing great. That's what we get. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So with regard, thank you, Meryl, to the immigration, I'm just going to, we're short on time, but I want to just point out this University of Cincinnati study to which I referred, and which is now already pinned not pinned, but posted in the chat, which is linked above. And in it talks about criticism of the Biden administration. This was in 2024 that this study was published. And by the way, there's all kinds of academic background supporting the conclusions here, to which you can refer if what I'm about to read is not sufficient. It says criticism of the Biden administration's policies are widespread. This is while he was president. Some argue that Biden is being too proactive, while others argue that he is not addressing the current issues with sufficient or appropriate action. Critics on the left liken his approach to former President Trump's, while critics on the right accuse him of being excessively liberal on immigration matters. Here's something that I will refresh Steve's memory. This is what it was written contemporarily. In recent news, House Republicans passed an impeachment resolution against Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, citing that Mayorkas violated the Immigration and National Security Act and failed his duty to the public in controlling the border. But nobody said anything. Nobody criticized Trump. Biden. The only president to get criticism is Trump. That was the argument of the caller, and obviously he's forgotten things conveniently. Daryl, followed by Dr. Mitch.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to first point out when Steve left the stage, he left the room, so he's not hearing any of this. I do. It's very interesting. All of these I call them Trump whisperers, right? So, the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one. And the simplest explanation is that he meant what he said. But we get all of these whisperers who, no, that's not really what he meant. Because I know him. I know how he thinks. I know what he's thinking. And they don't realize that if Trump walked past them on the street, he wouldn't even look at them. And it's just so strange to me. On the economy, Meryl is right. A lot of this started, last year. Here are some facts. Last year, a record number of people in this country sold plasma, meaning people are selling blood to buy food, to pay rent, to live. I didn't know about this until about a month ago when I went down to Grand Central. I've been donating blood twice a year since 9/11. I went down to donate. I'm O negative. They sent me a letter. Hey, you come down and donate. And then they asked me if I wanted to sell some plasma. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are you people talking about? Why would I sell blood? And I went down the rabbit hole. And again, for the first time ever, a record number of people last year in this country sold plasma. We also have to look at the fact that credit card debt is something like $18 trillion, and people are using credit cards to pay rent. They're using credit cards to eat. Most people, I think it's something like 57%, are within $10 of the limit on their credit cards. If this didn't start during the war, this is something that's been coming, and this is exacerbating it. And this is only part two. If you speak to economists, we're in for a long road on this one. Yeah.
Can I bring up something that you mentioned the other week, which I thought was really relevant to this point? Can you speak to the buy now, pay later momentum too in the installment payment?
Yeah. Last year, a record number of people purchased their holiday gifts on these buy now, pay later programs like Afterpay, Klarna. These are basically payday loans in a sense, right? And again, like we're the news doesn't really talk about this.
I sold my soul to the company store.
There you go. And we don't have enough shacks walking into Walmart and paying off people's like Christmas plans and things like that. But again, this is really just part two. As the strait continues to be closed, you're going to start to see pressure from other nations. There was a report, I think, in Politico on maybe yesterday that the UAE is actually attacking Iran anonymously because they've already left OPEC. If the Saudis leave OPEC and we're looking at the collapse of the petrodollar, which will basically send us into a massive tailspin, we're in trouble. And again, this is only part two. Last year was part one. People are hurting.
By the way, Daryl, you neglected a very important part of the equation when you talked about people selling plasma.
Mm-hmm.
What social strata, economic strata are we talking about?
Usually the quote unquote people at the bottom end of the ladder. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Middle class. I'm looking at an NBC News story from February that talks about the record number of people selling plasma. And the headline is, middle class Americans are selling their plasma to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Last year, people in the United States made an estimated $4.7 billion selling their plasma. Donation centers are popping up in middle-class neighborhoods, including suburban strip malls and college towns.
Yeah. So, I mean, then we get into what is actually, is middle class now what middle class was, or is middle class now upper lower class? Now, but that's irrelevant. So we're in for some pain, and like I think I mentioned something about Treasury reserves and liquidity swaps, and it's the highest it's been since 2008. And again, the war is the distraction to me. The war is the distraction. Because people aren't talking about what they're going through. They're keeping it, they're internalizing a lot of this. It's not sustainable. I was in a room the other day, Gary, and there was a woman who said she was well off, and she basically said, let him eat cake. And I don't know if she meant to be facetious or if she was just trying to be sardonic. I have no idea. But history tells us that this is not sustainable. And when people start thinking, what else can I lose? Then society is in trouble, in a sense.
By the way, this NBC article, just for the edification of people who are wondering, the war began, I believe it was February 28th. The article was published on February the 12th. So their story, and it's a pretty extensive one, was obviously reported on even before that, but it was published on February the 12th before the war. They were noting a record number of plasma sales.
Yeah.
So if the president were to be asked about that, why is there a record number of plasma sales among Americans, especially around middle class Americans? Well, I don't care about that. All I care about is the nuclear weapons.
He's made $4 billion since he came in to office, and yet people like, he's not in the room, but people like West Virginia Steve will continue to carry this guy's water, and he wouldn't look at Steve if he passed him on the street. And it's a phenomenon that I just don't understand.
But it is a phenomenon, and let's not lose sight of the fact, West Virginia was part of the Union. It wasn't part of the Confederacy. And West Virginia used to be a blue state. And now West Virginia is solidly red. So there's something there.
And Manchin, so West Virginia, it's about the closing of the coal mines, but Manchin lived on a yacht during, he lived on a yacht. And he's talking about how he's the best representative for the people. When I'll wrap. When Hillary Clinton first said that people vote against their interests, I absolutely did not understand what the hell she was talking about. But I'm starting to, at some point, I just started to understand more and more what she was talking about, because to certain people, they understand who he is. They'll make excuses. They'll even say, yeah, I know he wouldn't speak to me, but it's not about that. It's about, he's not one of me, but he's against them. And it's really just about us and them in some of these people's minds. And thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Dr. Mitch, you do have time to wrap it up for us today. I know you were worried you wouldn't get an opportunity, but here.
Thank you, Gary. I've kind of been waiting patiently. A little bit of this is very, very simple, because everybody, when people are hurting, they're looking for a hero, right? And a lot of people use the comparison argument, which is kind of a false argument. Like, I like him because the other person's worse. I mean, this is the mind game, right? And the best thing that the Republicans have is a lot of Democrats, in a lot of instances, are worse. But the only question you need to ask is, are they balancing? Is anybody that you care about balancing this budget? Is $6.5 or $7 trillion a year not enough for us to support America? There's this joke going around where it says, somebody says, America's so great, it's the richest country in the world. And they say, well, does everybody have food? No. Does everybody have health care? No. Do you get free education? No. What do you get? You get weaponry, right? And Trump just proposed another $500 billion to add to the $2 trillion a year deficit. That the way that's made up is in a couple of ways, but primarily it's through inflation, right? Like, somebody has to make up the difference. And I usually ask somebody who comes in and defends them, and I ask them, can you give me the social security numbers of your grandchildren? They say, why? I said, because I'm going to take out credit cards from your grandchildren so I can buy a bomb I can drop on another country. And they'll say, are you out of your mind? I said, no, you are, because that's what you're doing. So I think we could kind of talk issue by issue, but the bottom line is poverty is a form of violence, in my opinion. And it's being hoisted on us because, and we haven't even felt it yet. I heard a horrible, a prognostication this morning about how the supply chains are going to be affected by, all of the refineries that have been destroyed, and how the output of liquid natural gas has decreased by 20%, and the cost of Brent crude and shipping, that we haven't felt it. And we're going to be, in the next 60 days, we're going to be having some food crisis because of all of these issues that hasn't been factored in, let alone the inflation. So, people in the government are bickering between, this and that, but who's taking the people into account? I would argue that neither party really is. They don't care about it. They're just bickering. They're trying to get headlines. Remember who Trump is, right? If you read The Art of the Deal, he's a guy that takes out loans from banks and then basically defaults on them, files Chapter 11, negotiates them, and collects, makes billions of dollars. That was his model. He's had thousands of lawsuits in New York for people he hasn't paid. We're talking working class folks. He's an interesting guy, and that's bleeding over. I think at the time he was elected, he made a lot of promises, things like balancing the budget and opening up our economy and our energy reserves so we could give a peace dividend to America. And look, I think there are tremendous forces in the world, but it's almost like an idiot computer that all it wants to do is make money. It has absolutely no empathy. It's like AI with no consideration for humanity, and it just keeps going. And eventually, you run out of clients. I mean, I don't think it's a smart business model to price every single person out of the market so nobody can buy your stuff. Then what? Okay, you can live on a yacht, but so how long can you do that before if you don't have somebody to take care of?
If you know how to fish, you're going to be okay.
Well, maybe if there's, maybe if you still have fish, but I think I have to agree with several of the speakers that it's completely unsustainable. The national debt, all this stuff. Nobody's thinking fiscally responsible. It's very, very simple. The only thing on these people's minds, and if I was running for office, I'd say the only thing on my mind right now is not only balancing the budget, but making sure it's a surplus, so that we have money to spend on things. Why are they spending money on stuff that we don't have? That they have to bleed out somehow out of the raising unsustainable prices on American people. It's insane. It's mean, and it's stupid. I work in the financial sector, and I always look at things with two lenses, right? I'm also a medical examiner, right? So I look at things from a medical lens, and I look at things from an economic lens. It's completely unsustainable. And
so you're going to do the post-mortem, the economy. Listen, what you say is absolutely true. My son used to always tell me there's no difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party. And they want us to believe there's this big difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. And we hear these arguments every single day on the stage here about how the other party is a bunch of dummy heads. And our party is the savior. And all of them say they're going to reduce the spending, and all of them spend like drunken sailors. And the reason they do, and I'm not just talking about the presidency, obviously I'm talking about the Congress, because they supposedly control the purse strings, is because it ain't their money. If it was their money, they would be doling it out judiciously. But it's your money and my money, so what do they care? Excellent points, Dr. Mitch. We're out of time. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 o'clock New York time, so until 5 o'clock New York time tomorrow for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum. Everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
I would like sell pussy pretty much. He didn't go into details, but he said Monica would make a lot of money because she's a white BBW, and he didn't say why Ashley would make a good sex worker. But he did specify that I would be a high-paying or high-charging.
Anyway, he doesn't want to talk about it. We can talk about how we're winning this war. Like I already mentioned that if you weren't even in the room, but I said like you haven't even seen half of what America's power could do.
Harry,
okay?
You know how much the war cost for USA so far?
$29 billion.
$29 billion, and you know how much
nothing.
it costs.
It's chump change for us.
And you know how much it costs they run?
It's supposed to burn like that?
270 billion. Hey,
if you want to come up,
My grandfather was
let me ask you this.
And that was all anybody ever heard of it again. They were like, yeah, we're done with that one. All right. Thanks for playing.